King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at kingcomics.ca, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby. Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Maximus Rex, and this is Big Baby Reviews. How are you doing today? So we are here, finally. We are at the Singularity, my Singularity. So the moment where I really consciously conceived of the idea that I could possibly become a comic book artist, illustrator, cartoonist. And so we are finally going to lift the veil on what that is, the veil being this bag and backing board, to reveal what is that issue, all right? Some of you may have guessed it, some of you may have not, but here we go. That issue is X-Force number 2. So, X-Force number 2, dated September 1991. I would have been 10 years old at this point. And when I saw this cover, I don't know why, but I just really responded to it. I'd seen other comics and stuff, but this one was just dynamic, and the finish on it was slick and, you know, different. Different was definitely what was happening here compared to the styles I'd been used to before this, right before this issue. There's something a little bit untamed about this, which is awesome, right? And one factor about Rob Liefeld artwork that I will say, and I've heard it said on CK, and they're definitely right. I'll use the same word because it's 100% accurate. It seems attainable when you're 10 years old and you've been drawing for a while, and, you know, originally from video game characters and stuff I would see in cartoons and books and things and illustration books. This style seems attainable, you know. It seems like I can kind of master some of his tropes and stuff, and I say that as a 10-year-old kid. I thought that, not that I did. I did some really bad Rob Liefeld rip-off drawings is what I did. I copied the crap out of this book, honestly. But, you know, it got me really on the road to wanting to do this. Some things about the cover that I will say, first of all, very dynamic pose, but we're going to start seeing the kind of Liefeld trope of, you know, the anatomy being iffy, but that didn't matter because it's so interesting and dynamic. And I don't know what it is. I rarely hear it mentioned. I do know Liefeld was looking at manga in and around the time of like late New Mutants and early X-Force. And, you know, though it's not quite a manga style, I do feel like he was taking some inspiration, and that's somewhat defining some of his stylistic choices during this period. It is my favorite Liefeld period, obviously, probably for mostly nostalgic reasons, but there's just something about this period, I think, where, you know, it's just, again, forget about the accuracy of the anatomy and stuff. It's just very dynamic in the same way that late, Jack Kirby was around for a long time, but like 60s, 70s, more 70s and 80s Jack Kirby kind of got a little more almost abstract in some sense, but also super awesome and dynamic if you understand and really appreciate composition, right? So Rob Liefeld's strength is in dynamic, bold compositions, right? Whether, you know, you like it, whether there's some anatomy problems here and there, you know, whether he's drawn the feet or not. In this case, we only have one foot on the cover. It is there. This character called Kane, we'll find out. Both legs are bent backwards, so we don't see, you know, maybe you think there'd be a bit of a calf here or whatever. But in the same instance, you know, this leg compared to that one is pretty darn long, so that doesn't work. But if you don't pay too much attention to those specific details, the overall impact of the image is what's important, right? And again, the attainability of this style of artwork, right? And these lines, and you're like, I think I can do these lines, right? Like, or lines similar to that. I think I got the idea of this simple pattern that he's using here to create a reflection, okay? Another thing I'll point out on this cover, the circle not being a perfect circle at all, okay? If you really pay attention. But who cares? Because again, you don't really notice that. It's a little lopsided, but it's got the X in the middle, and then, you know, you see the individual kind of insert panel art that's there, you know, that you maybe don't notice right away. But then, oh, okay, there's a guy here. Ooh, who's this, you know, pharaoh looking lady? Is that her name? Oh my God. And then we have Domino and Cable at the bottom. So, let's see if I remember these. Warpath, Cannonball, Boom McBoom. I like calling her McBoom Boom, but it's Boom Boom and Shatterstar. So basically this cover also cleverly, I think, introduces the characters we'll see in the first part of the story who are not X-Force, right? And also reminds you that this is an X-Force comic and this is kind of the other story that's going on, or part of the other story. So, you know, really this is A story and this is B story, but B story is taking precedence on the cover because as you open up, that's what you're going to start with is the B story. So storytelling wise, that's kind of interesting. I take note of it and I notice it now, and I think it's a good way to start off an issue. Just, hey, let's start off with the antagonists rather than the quote unquote, you know, heroes, or at least heroes of the book, right? So yeah, so X-Force, Deadpool's back. So I'm like, you know, originally I'm like, is that Deadpool? Is that Deadpool? But I think I'd seen Deadpool. I kind of had a sense that this was Deadpool here, right? There's kind of a buzz already going around about Deadpool at that time. The Blood Hunters, right? So I don't know if this starts the trend of Liefeld and blood. As you know, if you know anything about Rob Liefeld, I guess from this point on, there's a lot of the use of the word blood in titles and names of characters, right? It's kind of almost, you know, satirically his thing. So let's crack this one open, have a look at what's going on in the Blood Brothers. Make sure this is fairly centered. Looks about right. All right. As a French Canadian, I liked this as a kid, so I'll read this. I think there's a spelling mistake, right? It should be Port Meunier, okay, or Port Meunier, I guess you would say in English. But if I pronounce this properly, French-wise, Port Meunier Shipyards, Anticosti Island, province of Quebec, Canada. So, funny enough, I'm a French Canadian at that point, 10 years old, living in Victoria, the opposite end of the country in the west, surrounded by Anglophones. So, you know, to have a little taste of home in a comic book is very surprising. And as I'll learn, these guys are connected to Wolverine. Wolverine's Canadian, and you know, but I just, even as a kid, kind of just appreciate that, where like the comics would reference areas or parts of the country that I'm from or that I know about, right? So basically, if I'm not mistaken, Deadpool is kind of acting as a security guard for this illicit moving of goods down by the port. Deadpool's Canadian as well, right? So he's operating in Canada, and this Kane guy is working for the Canadian government, and he's there. He's the new Weapon X, right? He's kind of like the Wolverine's replacement. I don't know where in the timeline. Is he the third guy, second guy after Wolverine? I have no idea. But here he is, sent on a mission by the Canadian government to take out this operation, and I guess by default, Deadpool, right? So again, you're right in the middle of the action. The last thing you see is the beginning of some more dramatic action. Kane jumping here, okay? Let's start with the art. I love it. It's all very cool. I love the shot of Deadpool. It's instantly dynamic, you know, fun to look at, the lines and stuff. It just, it makes the characters, I don't know, almost electric, I guess is how I describe it. Even the nonsensical hatching and stuff. It's just, I don't know. There's something texturally gratifying, graphically gratifying about it, even though some people would claim it's totally wrong. But I think in this case, you know, drawing art, it's very subjective. So, you know, is it wrong? I don't know. I still like this, even though you can't see the eyes for some odd reason. And I copied this shot here so many times. Rob Liefeld probably did too, but that's okay. He's known to do that. I'm okay with it. I do it too. So we get a cool looking kind of, I wouldn't say full double page splash, but almost. And I would say, I think this is a smart use of a double page splash. I really do like a nice big image on a double splash, but with a bit of like, I don't know if I'd call it that much storytelling, but yeah, for sure. There's fighting storytelling in this case. And it just, you know, makes the page a little more complete and not so much of a kind of a vanity illustration. Although, you know, there are some double page splashes that are super awesome that are one continuous image. But in this case, I do appreciate the fact that he just, you know, added the panels to make it a little more complex and throw in some more story beats and storytelling. So credits, what do we have here? Rob Liefeld, ideas and pictures. So I have to assume that means he's plotting and he's also penciling and inking. I do think he's got assistants at this point, those guys who would help him out in Extreme Studios later at Image, so like Marat Michaels and Dan Fraga, just to name a few. But I do think overall this is probably mostly Liefeld artwork. They were probably at this point maybe just helping out with backgrounds and stuff. I could be wrong, but that's how I feel. Rob Liefeld's always been adamant about faces. He talks about it now that, even back then when he had other inkers, he would always ink the faces himself to get that distinctive Liefeld look, which I believe, and makes sense once you hear that. And then occasionally I just like see some weird stuff where I'm like, did Eric Larson ink this? There's something of a Larson quality here, but that happens later on in issues like maybe even in this issue, if I'm not mistaken, there are some pages that were inked by Eric Larson, which I always saw as a kid, thought it looked weird, but figured out later that Eric Larson inked it. When we get to those pages, I'll talk about it. Fabian Naichizi, I've heard it say, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Words and Insomnia. I don't know about the Insomnia because this is a pretty sweet deal. If all you're doing is scripting, you're doing what Stan Lee did. So the artist has basically drawn the whole story, and all you have to do is to figure out what the characters are saying amongst themselves, right? So, and as long as you make sure it makes some sense and it carries the story along, man, I think you could script this in a day, maybe 2. I definitely think it wouldn't be that much of an issue to script all of this comic in 1, maximum 2 days, and pick up a pretty sweet paycheck for it. Chris Eliopoulos, Letters and Tequila. I hate when they try to be funny. Brad Van Cata, Color Art and Goatee. And forget about the editors. And what Kane is saying here, he's, Deadpool's making fun of that he's the strong silent type, and obviously Deadpool is quite the opposite. He's, the merc with the mouth, they call him, and he's funny and stuff. I don't subscribe to the idea that Rob Liefeld had this idea originally. I really do think that this is a choice by Fabian Naichizi to just somehow make that character interesting, or a little bit different, because he becomes famous for that. Rob Liefeld has only ever done quippy characters after Deadpool, right? And a lot of his usual character designs are lethal kind of characters and very serious, die-hard kind of characters. When I say die-hard, I mean the actual character he created, and being in that vein of the serious kind of silent type, which Kane is in this case, and it plays off of each other, so it's interesting. Kane is saying to himself, don't let him distract you. That's what you hear in the narration, so it's in his head. He's not saying it out loud. And of course, Deadpool is saying all sorts of, nutty stuff and trying to distract him. So yeah, again, what's great here is I copied this pose. This pose always confused me originally. I'm like, how is this his leg here? And then I figured out it was Deadpool's and stuff. And, the proportions change. He seems kind of small here. But again, it just moves and it's dynamic. You do have generally, the reading direction kind of strength lines, the kind of S shape, this thing. This leads you down here. This leads you across, then you got Deadpool's leg pointing down. These are subliminal visual cues you don't necessarily notice when you're reading, but they do help you point you in the right direction. That's what they do. Copied this so much. Love the dynamics of that. The good old use of those perspective lines going to a vanishing point, very manga, helps to, this is another example of, I think, Rob Liefeld trying to incorporate manga type tropes into American comics, even though, no one really credits him with that. But I think, this is, exhibit A for that kind of thing. This page here, this feels like stuff you would see in manga in the 80s and 90s that, you don't yet see in American comics, and guys like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld start to bring that in, right? That kind of broken up, energetic border. Some funny sound effects. Crachak, I guess that's the wood of one of these crates breaking. Right? And here's another odd comic book moment for me as a kid where, I don't know if you'd term it body horror, but this seems to be a thing. Last episode we looked at Wolverine, where LCD, the little girl robot, disconnects her head and throws it around. So this guy Kane can actually disconnect his hand and kind of projectile throw it at people. So he does it to Deadpool. I kind of like this. This is so gross, right? I find this panel in a way, just if you want to know what Deadpool's about, this page, the sequence, and specifically this panel kind of tells you pretty much everything you need to know. And I don't think that's a Liefeld thing he came up with. I think it's a Fabian Naichizi, the scripter, doing that. Great shot. Copied this so much, right? Copied this, I remember. I lifted so many drawings from this comic. just because, again, they were attainable. I could like break down and see how he had done it, right? Like, okay, he does, I know for sure he figures out the contour of the arm, right? Okay, and then he adds in these kind of highlight lines, I guess I'd call them, right? To kind of give it a second kind of layer there. And then he comes in with some fine lines to define the muscles and stuff, and then these kind of very small swooping lines for the cybernetics of it. And I mean, it totally works, right? It's a Rob Liefeld arm. The anatomy's Rob Liefeld anatomy, but that's okay. Jack Kirby has Jack Kirby anatomy. It's not realistic. It's not meant to be. So here, just not super well rendered or understood, but basically he shoots, you know, Deadpool. I feel like, you know, this panel would have been better and just clear what's happening if we had had kind of the explosion of the projectile coming out of the gun, right? And it is kind of pointing at Deadpool. I just feel it was a little confusing here, or just not as effective as it should be. This panel was drawn, you know, so quick. So a lot more kind of posing, standing around, and you know, these guys are so dumb that while they're arguing and keep their eye off of Deadpool, he has time to skitter off. And he actually kind of points it to him, right? Points it out to him. When he's caught, he'll wish he'd stayed. Where is it? I see it somewhere. Where do they realize? Oh, it's all... Wow, okay. So, so it's implied that basically, while Deadpool's down here on the ground, they think incapacitated. They have a conversation where they basically... Throughout this whole conversation, we have to assume that no one is keeping their eye on Deadpool, right? You know he's a lethal assassin. He's well trained and stuff. Why would you can have a conversation and keep your eye on Deadpool, right? Like you can cuff him, you can tie his hands up or something, right? He's completely incapacitated. He's still talking, you know. So basically, this whole sequence while they're talking, Deadpool escapes. What? Deadpool gone? Well, yeah, you weren't looking at him. And again, this is more of an cheesy thing for sure. You've got this character Bridge, I think he's called. He's a shield guy. By the way, Dudley Do-Right just lost his man. Okay, so he's referring to him, and that's where he figures it out. Just, you know, simple issue of just keeping your eye on the guy. Right, B story over. Almost half the issue. Fun dynamic fight though, so you know, as a kid, thought it was awesome. Again, the drawings are really hitting me hard. And you know, after this issue, I pull out the paper and I start copying, you know, almost every drawing in here. You know, give Rob Liefeld shit for not doing backgrounds. I mean, I think this is more than enough. It was probably done very quickly. Maybe just a bit more black down here to give him more volume and stuff to the mountain. You know, just contrast from foreground, midground to background. But totally serviceable, works. Sometimes, you know, they criticize Rob Liefeld for shortcuts, but sometimes I think they're shortcuts that work. Sometimes they don't. I'll be honest. But sometimes those that work. These are two, I think, if I point out, that work. This background here and this ship here. Not a lot of detail. You know, you start off with a silhouette. It looks like a cool sci-fi ship. You throw in the window, bit of shade underneath. You get the sense with the coloring and stuff. The colorist was clever that, you know, it's a certain time of day and the sun's kind of low and shining. At least that's the impression I get. It's shining on the side here, giving us a nice kind of light reflective glow, but that's soft, right? Here they are in the mountains. They're in the Adirondacks, right? I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's where they are, which is not too far from where I am. Just a little bit south in the north part of the state of New York. So the state of New York from Montreal is about an hour drive, an hour 15 at the most. Some more cool shots I copied. I like this here. This is, you know, good old Rob Liefeld kind of stoic character pose. Typical kind of, almost, I would call them family picture shots where they have the characters kind of lined out and, you know, you kind of get this, you're subtly being introduced to all the characters before you get into the action, right? If you haven't read any X-Force issues or New Mutants before, you know, and you have a description of each of the characters, right? So it's that Marvel thing, but I think it's pretty clever how it's done here. Like I said, I just, you know, as a first comic experience, this one was an easy read, clear storytelling and stuff. And there was some story going on here, for sure, in these first early X-Force issues. I like the tilt, you know, that's always cool to add some dynamics there. Tilt the horizon, you know, these guys are nice and straight with the horizon. You can take this here, tilt it, you get what you have there. Tilt it the other direction. All these little details that just make things a little slightly off kilter and more dynamic and interesting, right? Cable as well on a tilted horizon, okay? Interesting, like these things like this to me come from manga, right? Like just it's almost more of a design drawing than a realistic drawing where you have the characters, you have the background. It's almost two completely different layers and planes, right? There's no ground to speak of here, but it looks cool. And I do feel that's something from manga. And they're all kind of training, and their goal is to find Feral. It's like they're hunting Feral, right? In the woods, in what would be deemed, I guess, because it's the woods, her kind of environment and territory, right? So, I mean, other than that, it's a fun story where they're training. I don't have that much to say here. Storytelling, again, with Liefeld, pretty clear. I'll give him credit for doing more backgrounds than we usually see from him. This is in the woods, so, you know, generally trees and stuff are a little less work and a little faster to get through. But he's doing a good job here of just keeping it consistent. You know, Liefeld will have a tendency of having whole pages with no backgrounds, it seems, these days. And here, you know, those panels that wouldn't, I feel like he's still adding just enough, right? It doesn't take that long. It helps give you more dimension because of the overlaps. And more depth to your drawing as well. And like, again, just adding this here, these flourishes on both these panels are good examples of it, really helps. And it doesn't take that long to evoke the environment that the characters are in. All right, so we got some more infighting here. Feral's using Boom Boom's devices against her teammates. Cable, in this instance, eats a bomb to the face. And then we got Shatterstar showing up and looking cool with his swords. Liefeld really going crazy on the face inks here. I like it though. Don't get me wrong. There's something like super intense about this face here. Okay. This shot, super cool. You know what I mean? Good perspective here. Just wondering if maybe the girls proportionately are way too small for Shatterstar, but always like this shot too. I think these are both great poses. Very dynamic. This one's more head-on. It's got a bit of foreshortening and stuff. Just cool arm positioning, I guess, if I can say that, if that's a thing. And like the angle on Feral, right, that we're looking up at her and that she's kind of bent over and kind of, it's very cat-like. Very well done, I think, this pose here. Even this stuff, you know, where he punches her in the face. Very cool. I really think this is probably my favorite Liefeld issue as far as the art goes. Like, it's probably the top one. I really like X-Force #1. I really like, you know, all the other issues right up probably until, you know, the background artists are helping out more and the art's starting to look a little weird from page to page. Right up just a few issues before Mignola. But at least, you know, up to issue 5, I mean, that's the peak period for me. Like, X-Force 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are like peak Liefeld. So here we got Sam trying to calm Feral down and say it's just, you know, training, and she kind of goes overboard and rips him to shreds here. I'm assuming this should have been colored red, okay, but obviously for Marvel and stuff they would go for that, so that's pieces of his clothes now. And she's basically ripped his guts out, right? Cable puts her out somehow, but again, just like with Bridge earlier, some sort of indication on the gun of something happening. You know, I didn't instantly get that. It looks like he's pointing it at her, but he hasn't done anything yet. So just, you know, a quick spray there around the muzzle of the gun would have cleared that up, I think. So they're going to bring them all back to base, right? Obviously the exercise did not go as they wanted. Now these 2 pages, even as a kid I noticed they looked different, right? Definitely looked different. The textures and stuff, couldn't quite put my finger on it at that point. But later on, as I eventually got into Image Comics and other creators, and specifically Eric Larson, I figured out that these pages either were drawn or inked by Eric Larson. I do know now that they were actually kind of penciled, breakdown pencils by Rob Liefeld, because, you know, you'll see a lot of his kind of posing, the angles on buildings and stuff. The mouth here is very Liefeld. This angle here is not very Liefeld, so I wonder about that one, but I do think he still did all the breakdowns, right? Very Liefeld pose, all this stuff. Probably pretty loose, and then Eric Larson came in. So, you know, if I didn't know better, you know, and I didn't know Liefeld did the breakdowns underneath, I could almost think that Eric Larson just drew and inked all these pages. But I'm pretty sure breakdowns by Liefeld, loose pencils, and then Eric Larson inking on top. At this point, they're maybe already starting to work on Image Comics and stuff, and they're getting together. So maybe just Eric Larson trying to help out little Rob Liefeld at that point. He was a bit behind on his deadlines. These are definitely, I see here, screen tones that Eric Larson is using on other work he's doing in around this time, like on the Spider-Man series. This page also more than likely inked by Larson. And then, of course, the money shot. Makes sense. Liefeld kept that one for himself. And, of course, we find out that the Juggernaut now joins the fray. Pretty cool drawing. A lot of what I think John Byrne took inspiration from in one of those She-Hulk issues where he's parodying Liefeld and his style. I mean, again, to me at this point, yeah, like, what is this hatching for? I don't understand. I don't hate it necessarily, but I do feel like if you just leave the clouds and take out the hatching, it's fine, you know? Maybe, you know, foreground here, there's no hatching, and maybe you still have this back here, you know, maybe. But just this section here, just very odd to me, but still, as a kid, loved it. Very exciting stuff, okay? And of course, I'm aping and swiping from this comic almost every day, working on my drawings at that time of superheroes. What do we got left with this issue? Not much. Marvel subscription. And here's an ad for what will be the Marvel Series 2 cards. So I'm probably getting very excited about that. And I do have that box as well. I believe I stopped after 2. I can check my inventory there. But so expect at some point a review of Series 2 for sure. But I'm not going to do that many of those. I'm going to basically do up until when I bought them. So I'm pretty sure, once again, I have maybe some DC cards, but I have Marvel Series 1 and 2. So a review of that one at some point. So there you go, guys. This is the issue. The time was right. My age was right. Everything. Drawing since I was, since I can remember. This issue just catalyzed all that. I call it, again, the Singularity. This is the moment where I can remember deciding, I'd really like to try to become a comic book artist. This is the issue. So, Rob Liefeld, thank you very much, for any criticism I might throw out there in regards to your artwork or anything like that during this review. Know that I respect you completely. Art is subjective. And again, there's way more about your art that I love and that interests me and that motivates me than there is stuff I hate. Definitely only positive vibes when it comes to Rob Liefeld and his artwork. He's brought me a lot of entertainment with some of his more awesome drawings and even with some of the less awesome drawings. So again, thank you, Rob Liefeld. You are mostly responsible, at least at this point, on getting me on that road to want to become comic book artist, illustrator, and cartoonist. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Hope you like this review. If you do, like and subscribe. And I will see you guys tomorrow in our next episode. Have a great day.